Hey folks, it's your pal Mike Shea from SlyFlourish.com and Twitter.com/SlyFlourish, here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy DM Prep. This is a weekly show broadcast live on Twitch in which I go through steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master while preparing for my Sunday D&D game. In this case, I am running the campaign adventure Ghosts of Saltmarsh. This show and the YouTube video, if you happen to be watching on YouTube, are brought to you by the backers of Sly Flourish on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/SlyFlourish, you too can help keep the show and the website and everything going with your funding and support. All of the funding that goes there goes to help pay for the whole Sly Flourish infrastructure, servers and equipment and all of that sort of stuff to keep the show going. So if you like what you're seeing and you have and you want to give back, that is a good way to give back. So let's see. Last week I ran the last part of the fourth adventure. I think it's the fourth adventure of Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is Isle of the Abbey. And in the previous two, or probably three episodes of this show, I described my complaints with Isle of the Abbey. I think it is probably the weakest adventure in this book. And my top recommendations for it are basically you can take the concept of it. So one thing you can do is just dump it, right, and put in your own homebrew adventure right in the middle. That's certainly an option. Another option is you can take the theme of the adventure and work around the theme. My biggest complaints about it are that the island itself is relatively boring. The beach is great, and the whole beachfront and beachhead attack against skeletons is a lot of fun. So that's an encounter and a situation worth taking out of the book and putting it in your own, or running it as is. It's a fun way to have a battle against lots and lots of skeletons. But the rest of the beach is relatively boring. The rest of the island is relatively boring. So you can add your own interesting monuments and interesting places that kind of tie into the story that you're telling. Second, the map of the Abbey itself does not lend itself to an interesting story. It is a stairwell that leads into a central room that has 8 rooms leading off of it, all of which have people in them. So you're either having a big conversation with 24 people or you're fighting 24 people, but there's no good way to sort of explore that upper half of the Abbey. And the lower half of the Abbey is an area known as the Winding Way. And the Winding Way is a series of large chambers that seem to be filled with a random assortment of monsters or interesting hazards. Sometimes the hazards are pretty interesting. Crystalline Minotaur is very cool. A vampiric statue is really cool. But then it's got a lot of weird stuff like ogre zombies and ghouls and just sort of a random hodgepodge of undead. And it's linked together with a series of twisting hallways, hence the Winding Way, that are filled with just trap after trap after trap after trap after trap. And they're not particularly interesting and exciting traps. So they're not, in my opinion, it's not a well-designed death trap dungeon like Tomb of Annihilation is. It is much more of just, making your perception checks and hoping that you get your investigation and understand the trap, and then your sleight of hands to disable it or whatever it is to get past it. So so I was going through this. I've run this now twice. I've run Isle of the Abbey twice for 2 different groups, and I finished it with my second group last week. And I essentially changed up the rooms and changed up the design of the Winding Way so that it was less tedious and still quite dangerous. And it all focused around a cult, in this case, the cult of the Chained God, cult of the Elder Elemental Eye, who is protecting a particular weapon that was an anathema to them, a blasphemous weapon to the cult, which means it's a good weapon for our characters. And they kept it in a pool, and the pool inverted its positive energy into negative energy, and would send these necrotic waves all over the island. And it was this deadly pool. And sitting in my Sunday game, the weapon was a sunblade. So the pool, it's an intelligent sunblade, a lawful good intelligent sunblade. And the inversion pool was using the radiant energy of the sunblade and sending out as big waves of energy across the island. That was what's causing all the undead. And that was the main thing the characters needed to stop if they wanted the island to be cleared, so that Manistrad, Copperlocks, and the dwarves could start building an outpost there to help protect Saltmarsh from invasion. So that was my general storyline. So that worked out really well. I had 2 big chambers. One room where they got attacked by specters and a Bodak. And then, and it was a pyre Bodak. It came out of like a flame, a flame immune pyre Bodak. And they, I think it caused, man, Bodaks are badass, I'll tell you. Like, they are really dangerous creatures. They have like they do so much, so much nasty stuff. I really kind of dig them. Let's take a quick look at the Bodak. It's worth looking at. I wonder if Monster knows. Does the monster knows? Bodak Tactics. The monsters know what they're doing. Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Ammann. I just did a interview with Keith Ammann on this past Tuesday where we talked about his new book, and it looks like he has got an article about the Bodak. So this is probably worth reading, and I'll stick it in my show notes here because I would certainly like to know more about Bodaks. I guess we'll stick that up at the top here. I haven't cleaned up my notes. I need to clean up my notes. Bodaks. Let's take a look at the Bodak stat block. So Bodaks are not legendary creatures. They are not intended to be fought by themselves. They are CR6, so they're pretty high in challenge rating. And what's nasty is that the Aura of Annihilation, which is active or deactive as a bonus action, while active it deals 5 necrotic damage to any creature that ends its turn within 30 feet. That is a big range, right? So right off the bat, it's doing 5 damage to every character. So that's like 20, if you have 5 characters, that's 25 points of damage it's dishing out passively, right? And I would assume it just has that. In fact, when I had it as a Pyre Bodak, it was buried inside the burning pyre, and they didn't know it was a Bodak. And they were still taking the necrotic damage from the aura. And then finally, they blew it up, and then the Bodak sort of rose up and like, oh my God, that's what was causing that. So that was kind of fun. Death Gaze. So when it starts, when a creature that can see the Bodak starts its turn within 30 feet, the Bodak can force it to make a DC. So that means they can try to overt their gaze. And there's probably a couple ways you can run this. Again, it's not an action. So anytime a creature starts its turn within 30 feet of the Bodak that can see its eyes, the Bodak can force a DC 13 Constitution saving throw if it is incapacitated. Fails by 5 or more, it's reduced to 0. So it's just dropping people to 0. If they have to like roll like an 8 or less, right? Otherwise, a creature takes 3d10 psychic damage on a failed save. That's a lot of damage, right? 16 points of damage. Unless it's surprised. Here's the thing about averting. Unless surprised, the creature can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw. If the creature does so, it has disadvantage on attack rolls against the Bodak, so it can try to not look at the Bodak. I think I cheated when I ran this and said that they had to completely blind themselves, so I kind of screwed up. But that still means that essentially you either have disadvantage against the Bodak and it has advantage against you, or, which doesn't really matter because all it does is punch. I guess the punch isn't too terrible, but generally speaking. I ran it where they had to blind themselves. They couldn't see anything. And then they had a bunch of specters that they were also getting disadvantage on. So that was probably, I ran it too hard. Radiant damage when it starts in sunlight, and fist, which is just a regular 13 point, bludgeoning and necrotic damage when it punches. And then withering gaze, regardless of whether you can see it or not, if it can see you, it can force a DC 13 Constitution save. Or 22 necrotic damage on failed save, or half. So 22 to 11 points of damage on its turn. So that's a lot of stuff this one little creature gets, right? And one little non-legendary creature. So that was a fun fight. I had Bodaks killed one of my other characters. One of the player's previous characters died to a Bodak, so it was fun to terrorize him with Bodaks again. Yeah, I enjoy that. Hello, he's not your problem. It's good to see you. If you are in chat, feel free to say hello in chat. We can talk about all kinds of things, but we're primarily going to talk about Ghost of Saltmarsh. So they fought that battle, and then they went through a big set of double doors and entered the final chamber, which it was a big raised platform, big crazy Dwarven Forge setup I made for it, make it real nice. And there were 3 mummies, 2 regular mummies and a mummy lord. And inside the pool was the hilt of the Sunblade. And one of the characters walks in, and they hadn't even investigated anything yet. And he knew, the player knew. And he said, I reach into the pool and I grab the blade. And I'm like, okay. I said, so you reach in and you grab the hilt and you pull it out and you turn around and you're looking at the party and you're like, done. And then your hand turns gray and it flows up your body. And all of a sudden your eyes go white and you fall over dead. And he's like, dead? And I'm like, dead. Your character just died. And he's like, you know, and all the players. And I always love it when like, I don't know if everybody's game is like my game, but I've now had multiple groups where when a character dies, everybody stops saying anything and they all look around. And I think they're all looking to see if the player's going to cry. So, and in this case, he didn't cry, but he did kind of sit back and he was kind of like, huh. And then, you know, and of course, then I hear my 3 favorite words from any group whenever they hit a situation like this, which is when one of the other players says, don't worry, I've got this. And they're all like, got this? He's dead. He's lying on the floor dead. He's like, we're good. So I was like, all right, we're good. So as soon as the guy pulled the hilt out, the coffin's all open, big iron sarcophagi all open, and mummies start coming out. 2 mummies with pairs of necrotically charged scimitars, and then 1 mummy lord. And the hilt goes flying across the room, and Bleth, one of the characters, runs over and grabs the hilt, and it immediately just hammers her with a contest of will, and she loses badly. And then the blade's like, you're going to go up and you're going to kill that mummy. And she's like, well, we're on the same page on that anyway. Like, even though you've taken me over, I totally would have done that even if you hadn't taken me over. So she uses her boots of springing and striding and leaps to the upper platform and just starts hammering on the mummy lord with her radiant blade. She is, you know, funneling every one of her channel divinity. She's a paladin. So a paladin with a sunblade against an undead thing. And she's just hammering on. Oh, and they also had the relic that had flame strike on it. It was an old skull that they found in the pyre, a Bodaks skull that could cast flame strike. And she used that, or somebody else used that to cast flame strike on the mummy lord. The mummy lord is vulnerable to fire. So it took like 70 points of damage from that. And then it took like 50, 60, 70 points of damage from a series of radiant and charged sunblade smites. And they killed the mummy lord in like 2 turns. It wasn't even, you know, and they're 5th level, right? They're pretty low level and they still kill them. Mummy lords, they're powerful, but they're vulnerabilities. And the mummy lord tried to cast harm, and I think she succeeded on her save, but still took like 32 points of damage from harm. She's like, holy cow, this thing hits really hard. And then they fought the rest of the mummies and they killed the mummies. And then after they had pulled the sunblade out, all of the necrotic energy that was flowing over the island stopped, and all of the skeletons and all of the undead and all the specters that were, you know, invading this entire abbey were all destroyed. And they kill the mummies. They go out and they see this wasteland of bones, and they're like, well, the necrotic thing's gone. We did our job, and now the dwarves can come and clean all this up and build a tower here. So then they got on their ship and they made their way back to Saltmarsh, and they get off, and it's nighttime, and they get off at Saltmarsh, and one of the pier people is a vampire spawn of Zolek. So in my Saltmarsh game, for those who are just tuning in for the first time, early on in this adventure, the characters released a trapped vampire that was underneath the town of Saltmarsh named Zolek. And Zolek made a pact with them that he wouldn't like just kill everybody in town. He just wants to, you know, relax and hang out. He's really not, you know, bad. But he's slowly been charming a lot of people, and he's been killing bandits and ne'er-do-wells outside of Saltmarsh and then bringing them in as his vampire spawn. So he's now got probably a half a dozen vampire spawn, including a interrogator of Kyoland who came in. She is now a vampire spawn working for him as well. So he's got about a half dozen vampire spawn and probably a dozen charmed people that are out there working around in town. And he hangs out a lot at the tower of his wizard friend. Not Caraptus. I forget the name of the wizard friend, but there's a wizard guy that lives in Saltmarsh, and he spends a lot of his time hanging out with him and drinking. And then he has now taken over the tower north of Saltmarsh, which is becoming his lair. And he thinks that there's something really interesting buried in that tower. So he, there's nothing better than a villain that grows over time. And it's funny because I don't even like labeling him a villain. I mean, he's a vampire, right? And he's doing stuff. But even the players are like, well, you know, he's not like bad, really. I mean, he's not good. But anyway, so when they get off in the boat and there's a vampire spawn, Bleth, who now is known as Beth Lightspire, who speaks half with the trapped planetar that's inside of the hilt of this blade, pulls out her sunblade and runs him through and kills him. Right. And everyone else is like, oh my God. And the other vampire like turns into bats and flees. Right. And now word has gotten out that Beth has, killed a vampire spawn. So, and that's like the end of this adventure, right? And the end of last week's adventure. So now they are in town and they, things have changed. This is also the segue. This, I think they ended up getting, so they ended up meeting with the quartermaster of Ayuz and had an opportunity to buy a lot of different magic weapons. So they kind of stocked up on, they had funneled a bunch of money to the quartermaster of Ayuz and her agents to investigate what magic weapons they could get. And so there was their benefactor, the guy who works for Ayuz, came with a bunch of different random magical weapons and high prices, and they bought some. So they've recently acquired a couple more magic weapons. Like they got a shield. The super perceptive cleric is now even +5 on his passive perception again. So I think he's got a passive perception at 20 now. That's some crazy high passive perception, which is cool. So that is where we began. So we're going to go to, let me switch over the screen to our game notes for today. So this is Final Enemy Part 1. I hate that Quartermaster of Ayuz. It's the worst thing in Saltmarsh. Why is the Quartermaster of Ayuz a bad thing in Saltmarsh? I kind of dig it. I've been having fun with the Quartermaster of Ayuz. So let's do a quick look at our notes. So we have 6 characters, and I don't know if anybody's out this week. I can't remember. I always put out a note asking who can make it and who can't. And with my plan that I will run with as few as 3. And then I have a couple of alternate people I can call in for one-shot things. So we have Mac, played by Jerry, who is a Goliath Grave Cleric. Served on the Lady's Grace. I think Molly the Silver Raven. I don't think he still has Molly the Silver Raven. He's given his blood to Zolek in the past. He's a dark, like a Death Domain Cleric. And he was the one who, I forgot. So the guy who died was immediately restored with a Revivify on the next turn. So he was only actually out of combat for 2 turns. But he had 10 years in purgatory in his mind. I like doing that. When characters die, when they come back, they've spent some amount of time in the outer planes. That's far greater than the amount of time they spent away from the world. And also, he's got a crazy grave hand now. We have Bleth, which is now Beth. Sunspire. Human Paladin of Procan. Ink Black Whale Ate Her Parents. And Sunspire is the name of the intelligent blade that she possesses. And I don't know how that relates to the fact that she can hear the Black Death in her head. But basically the Sunspire, the sword, said, you think that killing the Black Whale was your mission. It is not. The Black Whale is just one of an infinite number of servants of Tharizdun, the chain god. And your new goal is to kill Tharizdun. That's what we're going to do. And she's like, okay. And she went to the group and said, hey, everybody, we've got a new quest. Our job is to kill Tharizdun. And they're like, I didn't pick up the sunplane. I'm not going down there. So that was fun. Skylar, played by Brian, is an Aarakocra Storm Cleric, knows Welgar Brian hands, blah, 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 blah. Just got a Cloak of Protection. I think also has a shield. And Skylar had his head ripped off by a Varghul, but he got better. So we now have 2 deaths in this game. Both have been resurrected. Corvel, Joe, a human fighter, got knocked in the head. He's the one that died. Spent 10 years in purgatory or limbo. And has a rotted hand due to sticking it in. Yeah, so Ayuz is to the world of Greyhawk what Sauron is to Middle Earth. Why does so yes, and the fact that there is sort of an evil quartermaster, like one of the things is that all the items that they're getting have this curses on them that let the people of Ayuz track these people. So yeah, like I think it's interesting that the quartermaster, and I think it's in the book, right, that the quartermaster is sort of bugging all of the magic gear that they sell. For this growing evil empire of Ayuz, right? So I think that works out. Kill Thar-Zadun is not an easy task. That guy's failed to kill in the past. That's right. Yeah, killing Thar-Zadun is not an easy task. There's a vast understatement, and probably I think the most likely outcome is that Beth will die in the process. That doesn't mean her lawful good sword did not demand it of her. We have Dave J, a Triton monk and fisher. He's been out for a while, so I think he just returned. And it might be interesting that maybe he's done a little bit of recon on these Sahuagin while everybody else has been running around doing their stuff. He has a sister who is a warlock of the Chain God and has been recovering. So there's a big tie into Thar-Zadun and the Chain God and the Elemental Eye, which are all the same thing, in this campaign. And I don't know where. I think that's going to take place more in the next two adventures, the Styes and Tamarot's Fate, I think are where we're going to get deep into the cults of the Elder Elemental Eye. Thurvin Pat is a half sea elf storm sorcerer. Served in the same pirate ship as Mac. Met Farron when bearing his captain, and he hates Zolek. So that's where those are the characters that we have in our game. Now, our strong start is going to probably be the invitation. The invitation of Zolek to his tower. So they can go to his tower. His tower is surrounded. He's got a bunch of probably goblins, right? And vampire spawns. What else does he have? He probably has a continual storm, or he's working on a continual storm. So that he doesn't have to worry about the sun. So, working on the continual storm over his tower. And his whole big question is, are we still cool? You killed one of my vampire spawn. So that's the strong start. Is the invitation to go see Zolek. Is there anything else? What other interesting things? Why don't we let's just for funsies. Let's jump back over here and let's take a look at our Lazy DM workbook. And let's go to fun town things. Random town events. Right? Let's see what's going on in town. Yeah, having the Quartermaster of Ayuz actually be a trader from the Scarlet Brotherhood is good too. That fits well. And I think, that's a fine way to go. I think the only reason why I wouldn't have done that is I already have Scarlet Brotherhood all over the place. So it's kind of nice to have even a couple of mysterious factions that don't necessarily come into play. So the idea that they are getting bugged items that are going to the information to the Quartermaster of Ayuz, or they're going over to Ayuz and his minions, is that he's not a big part of the plot. So I kind of like this idea that they know that there's a whole other thing that they've got to worry about, but they're like, we just don't have time. We've got Sahuagin, we've got Scarlet Brotherhood, we've got, Thar-Zadun cultists, and now we got this Ayuz thing, oh my God, right? And so you kind of want them to feel a little overwhelmed by the number of factions that they're dealing with, not to mention traditionalists and loyalists. So, he's not your problem says it's important to have cults that are selling out other cults. Yeah, I think that can work. And actually, and now I've got Zolek and his vampire people too. So you just want them to be like, my God, we're just surrounded, right? And it's not always happening. Like Ayuz isn't doing anything. It's not this looming threat like the Sahuagin are, So, random town event. Let's roll. I rolled an 18. 18. A visit by the circus. The circus has come to Saltmarsh. Wouldn't that be interesting? A magical circus comes to, and what's the town sentiment? And they're, oh, dazed. Oh, man. See, this is good stuff. I love adding some random. You know why they're dazed? Because a lot of them are charmed by Tharzadoon. I don't know how to daze people. I don't know how to spell populace. What kind of weather we got? 7. Light rain. And probably don't need the fantastic events, but every so often it'd be kind of funny. Like, hey, what happened? What fantastic event happened? 19. The border to the Fey realm grows thin. So maybe it's a Fey circus. Ooh. And maybe it's Mother Nightshades. Mother Nightshade's circus comes to town. How's that? Right? That could be very interesting. I kind of dig that. So what are some interesting monsters? So you could have Displacer Beast, Owlbear. What are some other crazy monsters? Centaurs. Let's jump over to here and let's go over to monsters. And let's go to Fey monsters. And we'll just go through Blink Dogs. Blink Dogs aren't evil, which is kind of fun. Are these really all the Fey creatures in every book? It's crazy. Not a lot of Fey creatures. How is a centaur not in here? So I think that would be kind of cool. Who could be riding? You can have like halflings riding Blink Dogs, and a beautiful elven woman riding a Displacer Beast. Big Displacer Beast. Do they have bigger? Do they have? I don't know if they have the big grandmother Displacer Beast. So we'll make a really powerful Displacer Beast, 130 hit point Displacer Beast that does, 4 giant tentacle attacks. Legendary Displacer Beast. That could be a fun event. Yeah, Daragar says it's a shame you don't have fake creatures and Tomophos. I could probably look up Tomophos, but I think I'm probably good. It's a short scene. Jeremiah Hitchin says, "Oh yeah, that's D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is great. If you're not using D&D Beyond, you might consider it. It's really handy." Yeah. So now we got some fun events, right? Whenever you need, I tell you, just add a little bit of randomness. And whenever you need to see, like, hey, what's going on in town? And the idea of that Mother Nightshade's Fey Circus has come to town. Pretty badass, right? I don't know. I like that. I'm in. So we have Fey Circus. We have Invitation from Zolek, we have council meeting. And then traveling to the Sahuagin lair. So as I mentioned, this is the beginning of the 5th adventure, which is the final enemy. Final enemy. And I've started running the final enemy. Look at that. Isn't that cool? I've started running the final enemy for my other group. They are probably 2/3 of the way through that adventure, although the way they have approached it has been very different. So my other group did the standard, the goal for the council meeting, and the goal for the council meeting. Well, let's we can dump our secrets here now. Bang. And we don't need our fantastic locations. Bang. And we have 1 million freaking NPCs. I can kill a couple of these. I can move Kurtz and Sting. Major Ursa. Let's see. We can move all of these people lower on the list. Because... I need to organize my NPCs. My NPCs are so out of hand. Oh my god. Look how many monsters. Look how many NPCs. We're good on treasure for a while, man. If nobody got any treasure... Boy, I have one player is just like, I want a bag of tricks, I want a bag of tricks, I want a bag of tricks. He didn't get it. Oh, the magical ore. Yeah, so I need to do... what happened to... So the other... So Corvel, so this is going to be interesting. And I could use some thoughts about this. Oh, I forgot. I got to switch back. Sorry about that. I've been typing and not switching. So Corvel, the fighter, he found that there is this vein of abyssal material. Imagine, if you are Minecraft players, he found a strain, what do they call it? A vein of nether rock, essentially, like this weird abyssal metal buried underneath it was in one of the chambers of the Isle of the Abbey, at the Isle of the Abbey. And he mined it. He managed to pry some of this metal out, and he's taking it to the dwarves in Saltmarsh, and he wants them to forge a weapon for him. And I want to make him the equivalent of like a +1 or a +2 Great Maul. That has, I think like both and maybe the DMG's got some good thoughts about this. Does it have curses on things? Like, I don't want something nasty. I want to, it's got to be something that he likes and uses, but I don't mind it being a detriment. Treasure. Sentient magic items. So I don't mind giving him one of these. So we can roll a d10 on this chart here. 7. It seeks glory. I don't know about that. So it's forged from abyssal stuff, right? So I mean, the easy one is like it can inflict some necrotic damage. I'm just kind of looking for what interesting... I thought there was a whole list of... Yeah, here we go. Minor beneficial properties, 36. Can't be charmed or frightened. That's pretty good. While you have this... let's go down to treasure. cannot be charmed or frightened. 70 is 5th level spell. While attuning the artifact, you can use the action to cast a 4th level spell. After you roll on a 1 to 5, you can't cast it again until the next dawn. I like assigning spells to magic items a lot. I didn't realize that, like, oh, here we go. Minor detrimental. This is what I like. 80. Flat 80. While you're attuned to the artifact, other creatures can't take short or long rests while within 300 feet of you. That's pretty terrible. That's a minor detrimental property. While you rest, so I kind of like the idea that, you know, he rolls a d20, and on certain things happen. So like, nothing. 11 to 15. Regain no. I don't know. I don't know if I like that. Major detrimental property. Oh God, if that's minor, if I'm being unable to rest near you, 82. Each time you become attuned to the artifact, you age 3d10 years. You must succeed a d10 Constitution saving throw and die from shock. If you die, you're instantly transformed into a white. Wow. Ooh, I kind of like this. When he drops to 0, Spectre or White rises. That's pretty good. So, what's a good spell that he could cast? Like a nice. Let's look at spell sources, game rules, spells, all spells. And is there a way to look for, isn't there schools? Schools, necromancy, that's what I want. Filter. So probably a couple of spells wouldn't be bad. Let's sort these by level. Bestow Curse, Feign Death. Blight. Is that the one is that an area? Isn't there one there's one really nasty one that hits a single target? It's not, I mean, I thought there was one that was like a enervation. You can reaches out from you, touching a target you can see within range to drain life from it. The target must make a dexterity saving throw. On a successful save, the target takes 2d8 necrotic damage. The spell ends. On a failed save, the target takes 48 necrotic, and until the spell ends, you can use the action of each turn to automatically deal 48 necrotic damage to the target. The spell ends if you use your action to do anything else, if the target ever is outside the spell's range. That's a good one, and it's powerful because it's 5th level. And you regain hit points from it. It's a nice spell. So we're going to go with Enervation once a day. He can cast Enervation. Now, probably be there's either intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, and he's a fighter, so he's gonna be terrible at all of these. So I could do a flat DC, like a DC 15, because it's not really him doing it; it's the weapon doing it. That way, it's just a flat. DC 15 is pretty high. It won't get any better. It doesn't get any worse. That's pretty badass. And these might, I might sort of dole these abilities out over time. Can't be charmed or frightened. Does enervation once a day. It's probably a +2 magic ore. Yeah, because they're 6th level. It's time for +2 weapons. Not time for it. They don't owe. They're not owed a +2. I'm just thinking if like maybe another once a day thing is you can dump a bunch of necrotic damage. Dagner says you're more generous with magic items than I am. Yeah, they got a lot of magic items. You can pull from the minor detrimental properties and artifacts. Yeah, Mind Stealer does psychic damage when to collect nightmares. Ooh, that's not bad. Inflict wounds is another. Yeah, I think I like enervation because it takes actions to do it, which means he's not attacking. And trust me, enervation isn't going to do near as much damage as he does with an attack. But he also is a way for him to heal up hit points too. So it's kind of this neat. It's got a neat bit of flavor to it. I think I'm just going to make a +1 though. I'm stodgy with, +2 is pretty powerful. And they're just hitting 6th level. So, yeah, and he's already really tough. He dishes out tons of damage. He's good. We're good with that. So I think that's a good magic item. He's not your problem says no +2. I assume you mean don't give a +2, or you mean no, make it a +2. I don't know what you're asking. But with all the stuff that this thing does, I could even take away the +1, except usually players like to have at least a +1 bonus on an item, and that's not a big deal. Yeah, I think that's okay. So what else do we need? It's time for some secrets and clues. I've given players +0 weapons. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times a magic weapon just is magical, right? And if you look in the DMG, things like the Flame Tongue Sword have no plus bonus, right? There's no, it's a flat no bonus. And when you consider it's doing 2d6 extra fire damage on every hit, that's pretty good. I gave one of my other players a axe that was essentially the equivalent of a flame tongue axe, only it does lightning damage instead of flame damage. It's a storm axe, and it had no plus bonus, and he's still doing like 40 damage a turn, so it doesn't matter. So a question about the Fae Circus that comes to town is: should we just call it Mother Nightshade's, Mother Nightshade's Fae Circus, Circus of the Fae, and just not even hint that she's anything other than who she is? Right? Like, it'd be kind of funny if the creature that they've been worried about that's living out in Dreadwood all of this time just rides into town, and she's got a whole circus with her, and centaurs and everybody, and a big sign and like happy, Oni mimes and stuff. Just to say hello, and then they're planning on being there doing some tricks for a couple of days, and then they're gonna leave. That might be fun. So what secrets and clues do we have? Zolek has about 6 vampire spawns and 12 thralls in Saltmarsh. Zolek has the chipped tooth goblin tribe Yeah, he took over a bunch of goblins. Zolak. Believes there's something very powerful beneath. Let's take a look at. I forget the tower. Sources, adventures, goes to Saltmarsh. Saltmarsh region. The Tower of Xenopus. And he has goblins and dwarves that are mining below the tower. Probably Duergar, right? I don't even know what that is. So we're going to planning an invasion of Saltmarsh within the next 2 weeks. Have sunken. Manistrad, Copperlock's sister is an agent. The sage, who used to be Anders' butler, is now at the Styes. A week to the east. What other? 3 more secrets. A darkness. Darkness still grows out in the sea. It was marked by the characters in both the Emperor and the Emperor of the Waves and the Isle of the Abbey. A primeval island, huge obelisk, sits above a watery portal to the lowest layers of the abyss. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One more secret. What other secret could be revealed in today's game? What else could they learn? I like to sort of tie the other adventures together. A SB agent known as the Golem and is taken in the Sage for protection. Yeah, so they got some Scarlet Brotherhood stuff. We got some stuff about the cult, some Sahuagin stuff. And there we have it. We're not going to worry about fantastic locations today because they're all in the book. I got my NPCs, monsters today. We've got all those Fae things. I could stick them down in here. You gotta love it when all your villains come to you. But it's a lot of villains. It's going to be like 8 Oni. You know, they could destroy the whole town if they wanted to, but they don't want to destroy the town. They just want to have a circus. She thinks it would be fun. I love that idea. So that is done. I don't think he's going to get his bag of tricks. I think there was some heavy armor. Yeah, I don't think I need to worry about these bits of treasure anymore. So there we have it. There is all of my notes for today's game. I'll say one thing. So people who have been hanging around, and those of you who have been hanging around watching these shows all these times, thank you for sticking around. If you recall, when I was first running Saltmarsh, I decided that I was going to spend a whole day prepping D&D, and one of the things I did is I took all of the maps that were done by Dyson in this, and I had them all printed out. And I'll tell you, the maps are kind of a pain in the ass. Running digital versions of them is not bad. Like, having I have a monitor up in my living room or my dining room that I will broadcast the current version of the map. So I'll do, like, imagine the lower right screen here is a monitor that all the players can see. I will do something like this. I'll pull up the not the Mike Schley map, the Dyson map. I'll take the player version, and I'll say, like, okay, you guys walk in the front door and you see, this room, right? You see this, right? And then I'll kind of move it. And then and then you see this area, that's what it looks like. And so I can do sort of the fog of war. The problem when you have a great big map that you put on the table is there's no good way to do the fog of war, right? You got, like, how do you need like 25 sheets of paper that cover it all up and then sort of move them around. And it's kind of a pain. So, I mean, like, I might try it. Maybe I'll try it today. I have these big maps. So I'll print it out and I'll grab a couple of my old crappy black t-shirt scraps that I use for hiding Dwarven Forge stuff. And I'll just use those to kind of act as a fog of war. The nice thing about a black piece of cloth is you can sort of fold it up any way you want in order to fit what you've got. And, probably 2 of those is probably enough to cover the whole map and still give you enough that you can move it around and expose what the characters see. So I'm probably going to do that, I think. But generally, I found that the maps are kind of a pain. Yeah, no avail says I use specially cut pages taped to the map, covering certain parts of the map at a time. John 18 says big sticky notes. That's not a bad idea. Darger says, Dragger here says, I'm remapping pretty much everything. Yeah, so the other one is you can just do your own separate maps, right? It's not your problem. Says I've been printing the Dyson logo maps out for Avernus. I just decided to not worry about the fog of war. My players often put their books and character sheets on the maps, covering up rooms anyway. Yeah, that's not a bad way to go either. You could also have a little bit of recon. Like, if you have any spies that kind of have looked at it, you could, because my maps don't display anything. So let's take a look. Like, what would the map look like? So I basically put this whole thing out there. I wonder if I just put it out, how it'll go. And I have 3 maps because they could actually go in on 3 different levels. So I'm going to have to bring all 3 maps with me. But do they know, I guess they'll be like, oh, I'm kind of curious what's in this room. And they might go down that way. And they don't know who's where. They don't, so there's not really, but then, like, there's a big honking secret room in the lower right. You might move that. Just be like, there's no secret room there. It's actually over here. So that's not a bad way to go either. Just put him out and let him see the whole thing. This was actually, I remember when some of the early Dwarven Forge sets used to come with, like, a how to use this, and it said, like, you can use pieces of cloth to cover things up. You can build it as you play, like put the next pieces in line as people see it, which is one way to do it. Another way is you set the whole thing up and then cover it with cloth. And then the third way they said is just put it out there and let them see it. John Riz said, I had provided Lizardfolk map and they used it. That was the Beetle and Grim. Yeah, I've got the Beetle and Grim map as well, and I'm probably going to hand it up to them, which of course defeats the purpose if you then put this thing out and they see what's going on. Scott Smith says, I had a DM make copies of the map and blew them up to fit minis and would cut the copies and put numbers on the back and place it out when we got to that room. Yeah, that'd be another way. But if you look at, like, how complicated this map is, I don't even know how I would cut it up exactly. Like, there's so many rooms. He's Not Your Problem says, I found that my party, they're not that curious about all of the rooms. They care more about their characters a lot more than the map. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'm going to bring all the maps, which means I have to bring my giant acrylic sheet. And I will bring a couple of my big black pieces of cloth, and I'll start with that and see how that goes. And then they'll have to decide like which level they're going to go on. I will give them that intel that they got from the lizard folk, and we'll try that and see. Obviously, like I guess I used the map. Yeah, so I was going to say that like the maps were pretty useless, but now that I think back on it, like the one for Emperor of the Waves was really useful. That worked really well. I certainly didn't need the maps for the Lizard Folk Promontory. It worked well for the manor, so that's so maybe half the adventures it worked, and then it didn't work very well for Isle of the Abbey. So I'm probably going to throw them out as I use them too. I don't think I need to keep them hanging on to them. It's not like I'm going to run this adventure again anytime soon and fill my house up with junk. So, so that is where we are. What else is going on? I am hoping that my special edition Eberron book is at my FLGS. I put it on hold. I got the D&D Beyond version, and it looks awesome. I started reading it, and one thing I really like about the book, and I'm sure that they did this by design, although they weren't quite as, at least as far as I could see, quite as clear about it as I would have liked, which is that about half the book is valuable to players and half the book is valuable to dungeon masters. And it would have been nice if in the beginning they said, players, you should focus on chapters 1, 2, and 3. Dungeon masters, you want to focus on chapters 4, 5, and 6. And that way it's just clear who gets what part of the book. But it feels like a bigger version of Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. I know people weren't, I don't know how much of a fan people were of the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. If you give me a moment, I can look something up that might be kind of cool. I'm going to see how fast I can do this. So I've been having a lot of fun. Those of you who follow me on Twitter have probably seen this. I have been having a lot of fun with a sorry, I'm getting my 2-8. I've been having I capture all of the D&D tagged tweets that come across Twitter, and I've been doing it for 5 years. And I put them all into a big database, and now I've hooked them up to a search engine and front end called Elasticsearch and Kibana. And this lets me search all kinds of interesting things. So one of the things I'm going to look at right now. So in short, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, not very popular. And I think that it was probably due to not having a lot of the extra class stuff that Xanathar's had. So Xanathar's was definitely way more popular. And Eberron feels probably, I bet you it falls somewhere in between here. Like Eberron because it's this campaign book and it focuses on this big world, that'll probably be popular. It's also the first time we have a brand new class. It's the first new class in D&D in 5 years. That's a pretty big deal. But I don't know, that class has to be pretty well loved. I don't think it's going to do nearly as well as Xanathar's did, because Xanathar's is so universal. Like a lot of people aren't going to buy Eberron because they don't want to play in Eberron, but everybody bought Xanathar's. It doesn't matter if you're Forgotten Realms or not. So that'll probably be a big deal. But I think it's neat. I think it's a bigger version of the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. And that will be, that'll be interesting to see, how well it does in sale. I mean, not that it matters to me. Like I got it. I like it. I'm probably going to run at least 1, maybe 2 campaigns in it. So we'll see where we go. So it's 11:03, and I want to thank everybody for coming today. Sorry for, 5 minutes of me mucking around with queries just to show a chart that says that Xanathar's is a lot more popular than Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which you already knew. Next week, I will be back online, and we'll be talking about the game, and we'll see where things go. So, his natural problem wants to know about Ravnica versus Eberron. Watch Twitter, and I'll do some stuff like that. I can take a look. I can compare and contrast any books to see how popular they are. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for coming live. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching the YouTube version. And I will see all you guys in a week. So go out there and play some D&D.